people like Messi, you could put a message on tomorrow, eat bananas, half the world's eating bananas tomorrow. But it can start with two kids with a rolled up piece of paper, kicking it across the street. That's sport. Two kids become four kids become eight become 16. Next village play, all of a sudden, you're building an ecosystem because one village travels to the next village.
Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry.
Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Andy Moss, an entrepreneur whose career has spanned everything from leading the Subaru World Rally team to pioneering technology in global sports, launching businesses across continents, and now driving innovation through his consultancy, RAL 6010. Andy's journey is defined by bold pivots, resilience through setbacks, and a relentless focus on building ecosystems that connect people and create lasting impact, especially in the world of sport. Andy, welcome to The Growth Shift.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Well, Andy, I've been looking forward to our conversation today. You have had an incredibly varied entrepreneurial journey. Motorsport management, technology, and sports infrastructure. There's a lot going on there, and I'm sure there's some pretty impactful moments to share with the audience. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey that you've been on and some of the most impactful moments along the way?
As you can see by the colour of the hair, been around a little bit, and as you say, quite a long journey. And for me, life started with a really interesting start of life, leaving school and going straight out to Kenya and Africa, where I was involved in coordinating Mitsubishi Rally Art Japan on the Safari Rally and Côte d'Ivoire Rally. And that was a very formative time. That's where I suppose I became in touch with what life really means and how sitting in the UK enjoying the privilege of life against some of the hardships that were taking place over in Africa. And the challenge out there was always not the people themselves, but the institution, I suppose, in terms of amazing opportunity, amazing resource, major entrepreneurs, just never given the right chance. When I left Africa, I moved into Subaru and on that World Championship program, which was very successful. And I think the whole journey was shaped by valuing the relationships that you make along the way and valuing the people you meet and ensuring that what my gran and my mother always used to teach me is that you treat people the way you wanted to be treated yourself.
Wonderful. Andy, the world of rally sport, highly competitive, requires incredible reflexes and spatial awareness for what's going on. Right? Maybe many of the audience, don't really think of rally cars and rally car race drivers as elite athletes, but they absolutely are. People might look at, Formula One and say, oh, the cars are moving so fast and, it's so much more technical and so much more difficult. But I think rally is definitely up there. Half the time you can't see, you've got muck all over your windscreen. Of course, you have somebody telling you what turns are coming up, but you're moving at a mile a minute. You're flying over mounds and you're actually getting air in the car as well. Where I'm going with this is to a question for you. You have seen elite athletes and you have led elite athletes, right? You've also run successful businesses and you've been an entrepreneur for some years now. When you look at the commonalities between elite athletes and elite business leaders, are there any commonalities or are they completely different worlds?
I think there's incredible similarities, and it's one of the things that I really advocate around sport and how athletes should be involved in business and that their skill sets have an opportunity to be transferred. Actually, only this morning was I on the phone with a young lady out in the US who is a Malawian boxer, first Malawi lady to be in the Olympics. And she was talking about a program and a project about opening up boot camps in Africa and where she's going. But actually, she was talking to me with no confidence. And the message was quite simple. When you prepare to go in the ring, what do you do? And she talked a little bit about routine. She talked about a mental state. I said, okay, so what more do you want? Lift that, turn it to the right, put it onto the business, and there you go. She sent me a note about an hour ago saying, what an amazing conversation. I just needed that piece of boost. And I think, when we look at what athletes go through, first of all, they have to look after body and soul, and that's a regime that they go through. They train relentlessly for the big day whenever it comes, whether that's a single person in a ring on a boxing tournament or whether that's 15 on a pitch. They work together, they train together, and their mental state is really focused for that one mission. When we look at business, it's a long old pathway. We have to gain experience. Some people go to university, some people don't. Some people have the university of life, but you build and you build and you build your knowledge base. And each time you get bigger and better success, you also have a lot of failures. In my life, I've won a lot and I've lost a lot, and losing a lot sometimes puts you in a better stead than always winning. But the mentality of being able to focus, being able to deliver what you're promising to yourself on the day you need to deliver for your clients and for other partners is really, really important. Everything around the preparation of a sports person translates into business.
I love that, right? Because sports people are, they are growth minded. They're in constant pursuit of excellence. They often face constant failure. They recognize and the necessity and the importance of working on footwork, right? Of the small things, the habits that compound day after day. And it seems like it's these type of people who can make great business leaders, because once you have all of those things in place, there's just a little bit of information, well, maybe a lot of information left to fill the gaps, but you have all the pillars there, right?
I think, they work to a regime, they work to a schedule. Or sorry, when the green light goes off, you have to be ready. If you're not ready, you don't start. And in sport, again, when the green light goes, if the television isn't ready, everything fails on that basis. So there is no opportunity for failure. The other thing that happens in sport is things happen all the time. So you have to adapt. You have to adapt quite quickly. And those momentarily things can come along and your mind has to shift to refocus and put yourself in a position, whether you're an organizer and you've gone from beautiful dry conditions on a safari rally to the wettest mud you've ever seen in your life. You're having to adapt, and therefore teams have to adapt. I think exactly the same in terms of conditions and changes of schedules and things like that for athletes, whether they're in the Olympics or whether in their local races at school.
From what you've seen in sport and, of course, leading sport and working with high performing athletes, what do you think is perhaps the single most important transferable skill that those athletes have that would put them ahead in business, right? Because you listed out a few there, but what do you think is perhaps the most important that could be a key sign that any sports person could also make a very successful entrepreneur?
Although it doesn't always reflect in my own state and the way I operate, preparation. Preparation. They're immaculate in the way that they drill themselves and prepare themselves ready for that one moment, which is life-defining for them, gold medal or not.
Preparation. All comes down to preparation. Now, Andy, you've shared some really good points with us. You've done quite a bit on your own journey as well. When we look at, the information and the knowledge that you've gained, the perspective that you have, the experiences that you've been through across the globe, and you look back on that and say, this was the most impactful lesson that I had, that growth shift moment, the one that allowed you to redefine or reapproach business in a different way. What would you share?
There has been quite a few seminal moments in my life, from disastrous failure to incredible wins. I think when I look at one of the more defining or more successful moments was looking back at COVID, taking a view of my history. I spent a lot of time in China in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think when COVID was mooted around at the end of 2019 as some potential challenge in China, using knowledge, using connections, really started to understand that this was going to be something much bigger than anybody else. I've always been a bit of a visionary, a strategic architect, for want of a better word, an entrepreneur, and I do take risks. And as a result of taking risks, as I said, you win and lose. COVID, I decided that the impact of COVID would close down our industry, which was sport. And therefore, how could we have any effect on trying to prolong how sport could operate if COVID became anything significant? And it was just before Christmas. I came up with a concept of a hand sanitizer wall. I briefed the team and they went away over Christmas. And when we came back in January, we had the concept of a hand sanitizer wall. I think more glamorous than a wall on wheels. and with a number of hand dispensers on it that allowed us to put alcohol gel or non-alcohol gel, depending on religion, into to be able to dispense it. We introduced those walls into the Six Nations. COVID started to take a grip. Things were starting to escalate quite heavily. And I suppose the seminal moment, the fortuitous moment, the lucky moment, whatever you want to call it, was the Cheltenham Gold Cup, massive horse race in the UK, the super spreader as it became to be known, and the end of sport as we knew it in COVID times. At Cheltenham, we had numerous of our walls, and the following day, on the Sunday, every newspaper, every TV station, every radio story led with our hand sanitizer walls. The government stepped in, stopped sport, and the phone didn't stop ringing, whether it was from airports, whether it's from hospitals, whether it's from the police, supermarkets. Everybody required the access to the hand sanitizer wall. And for us, it was, the mission wasn't around making money at the time. The mission was trying to solve a problem. How do we keep our industry moving in really tough times? But actually, the world then replicated what was the hand sanitizer wall, and versions of it appeared all over the place, from coffee shops to whatever. But that time, we took some big risks. I mean, we basically stock bought almost the entire UK stock of dispensers, and we put in place some very serious single supply chain with gel, where we were pre-buying, pre-ordering. And the benefit of that is, A, we were able to hold our prices fixed throughout. I don't know if you remember, but a test tube of hand gel was nearly £50 to £100 in some places, whereas we retained our 5-litre sales at a very sensible price to all our people, customers. And the result of that was that long after COVID, those people remained as our customers. But we were able to build a significant fund during COVID, which enabled us to go into sport in a better way, in a different way, and we subsequently became the master licensees of Commonwealth Games, World Athletics, Rugby League World Cup, and provided all the infrastructure to the FIFA World Cup in Qatar.
Andy, that is incredible, and also very admirable as well. Incredible by way of, you had perfectly impeccable timing of positioning yourself for this opportunity, right? Of course, I'm sure learned through previous experiences and how to watch the market and look for these signals, but admirable, I mean, beyond the success that you had in the way of what you shared about how you proceeded, right? You kept your costs fixed when you very easily could have inflated them and taken advantage of the situation, but you didn't. Right. And I feel like this really ties back into something you shared at the beginning of our conversation of, what you saw from your time in Africa and how it impacted you. Right. And it's that focus on and the care for people that you take to what you do at the end of the day. Right. Wanting to provide, I suppose, sort of equal opportunity to people who could use that. Am I connecting the dots right here?
You are. However, there is a real big dilemma in this. And I won't name names, but people we know who are industry leaders, especially in sport, and we've seen it over the last, 10 years, some pretty major headline stories around people. Actually, being nice all the time doesn't work sometimes. It's the people it's the people in COVID who charged 10 times the amount of money that came out with huge banks and balances, And yeah, of course, they were berated for a little while, but they got broad shoulders, lived to it, came away with huge amounts of money. And sometimes you have to look at yourself and think, I like to look at myself in the mirror and know that I am who I am and I can go to sleep at night. But there are a lot of people who can overcome that conscience. And those people that overcome that conscience tend to be the people with the most money in the world, which is a bit of a bugbear sometimes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully those people took their money and they went and retired and they won't be doing so much anymore. That's the hope anyways. But as you said, the approach that you took allowed you to secure long-term relationships and engagements, and it's, still provides today. With all this in mind, I need you to draw some lines here, or not draw some lines, but to connect some dots for us here and draw the big picture, because we're talking about motorsport in the beginning and rally. We got into hand sanitizer walls and opportunity there. RAL 6010, what the heck does it mean, and what are you really doing today?
So RAL 6010 was born out of a potential another disaster within the life of what I've been through. RAL 6010 is the colour code for green grass. Green grass or grass is the foundation to everything that happens on the planet, from feeding the animals that we eat, to grow. It is solidly the foundation. And my approach to how consultancy within sport should be attacked is that there are ecosystems that need to be driven. And I'll use Africa as a really great example at this moment in time, because I started in Africa and I intend to finish in Africa. Where Africa sits at the moment is as the youngest population in the world. It's got huge amounts of talented people and resource. It's got huge amounts of natural resource in the ground, but it isn't leveraged in the right way. What's happened is the country needs money, so they go for the easy money. They extract and they sell. They don't process. There's nothing retained and there's no bringer. And we're now looking at the new era of sport. If we think about what's happened over the last 20, 30 years, Europe's had a lot of sport, FIFAs and Olympics, and it then went out to Australia and then back, and now it's in America. Next it's going over to the Middle East. Realistically, the next point has to be Africa, and Africa has to gear up to that. There are millions and millions and millions of people who can't afford to eat and don't have clean water. And therefore, we've got to change it around. So a lot of the strategy that RAL is passing over at this moment in time is around how do we start with an ecosystem. And fundamentally, sport is amazing, because you could put people like Messi, you could put a message on tomorrow, eat bananas, half the world's eating bananas tomorrow. But it can start with two kids with a rolled up piece of paper, kicking it across the street. That's sport. 2 kids become 4, 4 kids become 8, 8 become 16, next village play, all of a sudden you're building an ecosystem, because one village travels to the next village, they start to buy, some food while they're there and that type of thing, and it grows and grows and grows, and it grows beyond sport. It grows into tourism, it grows into medicine, education, and is this wonderful thing. So RAL's perspective at the moment, and RAL's future in terms of driving change, is around how do we create a sustainable ecosystem using sport as a tool in Africa. Sitting alongside that is a very ambitious program to create a new tier 1 sport, and that is the FIM e-bike World Cup, a new city centre based e-bike racing, basically Formula One on a bike in a city.
Indy, you have an incredible mission and vision for, the change that you want to affect. What does your day-to-day look like right now for helping to make that needle move?
Busy, but I'm passionate and I enjoy what I'm doing. It's really about connecting people. If we look at the Africa project, there are thousands of well-meaning ex-athletes, NGO, charitable people, all affecting projects in Africa at the moment, but they're affecting them in a micro perspective, and there's no joined up thinking. It being able to liaise with them and just give them a little bit of a thought in terms of how they could do something slightly differently that connects the dots, which creates an ecosystem, which makes their life easier and becomes there. One of the things that there is no lack of people or institutes wishing to invest in Africa. The challenge is, where can you securely invest in Africa? And if you invest in Africa, is it wasted and does it dissipate into nothingness? Or can it be put into a strategic business that can give it some longevity and grow security, and therefore more money can flow in to a point that the money turns around and starts flowing out, which is really quite interesting. When we look at my main focus, I suppose, in terms of what's commercially beneficial today, that's around the Bike World Cup. And my day looks like talking to lots of cities, lots of riders, lots of commercial partners in terms of trying to bring that together to make that happen during the course of this year.
Okay, incredible. Let's chat about that. I'd love, again, this is a really big vision. This is a really big goal that you have. You're moving mountains to make it happen. The end of the year, it's not too far off. So when you're looking at bringing a new tier 1 sport and making it central in Africa as that grassroots starting point, and we could call it, what are the biggest challenges that you foresee or that you're working through right now to make this happen?
The two things are separate. Africa's one, and e-bike World Cup is another. The biggest challenge with the e-bike World Cup is creating the vision. Is very straightforward from my perspective. The vision was around, what does a utopia of sport look like today? We know all the big sports are trying to adopt to new audiences, shorter format, more technology, fan engagement, all those types of things, equality, diversity, accessibility. So it was around developing a platform that fitted for today's market. When we won the World Championship in 1995, I don't think we even had internet. Today with things like all the social channels we've got on AI and looking at the adoption of AI over the last 16 months, realistically, for us to be a tier one in perhaps 5 years is really, really feasible. Some people might look at me and think I'm a bit bonkers, but, we have the right formula. So for us, city centre is really important because everybody wants to be in city centre. Formula One having a bit of success now, but also having a sport that would enable cities to be able to host us without too much impact. So therefore, with cycling, it's pedestrian barriers, very similar to a marathon. Most big cities have a marathon. They're experienced in road closure, so it's quite straightforward. But the real challenge for us is around finance, because for all intents and purposes, we're a startup, and startups are a bit tough because mainstream financiers don't want startup businesses. They want mid or, showing progress, at least having turned a wheel. And for us, we've had to look in a different direction from other entrepreneurial people, other athletes that are interested in engaging in something that's meaningfully different and looking at alternative funding. I think where we started was not about a sport. We started with the concept of wanting to make a sport that could fly the flag, could be the catalyst. But our mission is cleaner, greener, healthier cities. And there's a purist methodology about what we want to do. And what we know is all cities are bought into that already. They're already creating more green spaces. They're already looking at active micromobility. So we're not inventing the wheel. We're just trying to create something that is a catalyst to make those things go quicker.
Sounds like it could be a throwback on the COVID hand sanitizer wall situation. You read the market, you saw what was coming, what people were looking at, or what the world needed, and you brought it in, right? So right now, I mean, especially in the world of motorsport, right? People like these industries need to make a change, right? Emissions and carbon and all of these things that leave behind. But the world is moving in a direction of sustainability, of green motors, of green engines, and, bringing in an e-bike motorsport would potentially be sounds like it would be the first in this field as well. So an incredible opportunity. Now, what do you think are some of the risks? I mean, do you think that you might be too early? A lot of people look at, industry changing dynamics and initiatives, and it's either you're too early, you're just in time, or you're too late. Doesn't sound like you're too late. Sounds like you might be just in time, but how do you analyze whether or not the market is ready for this right now?
Well, I don't think we're too late, but we're probably out on time. I first came up with the concept at the end of COVID, the end of 21, when UCI Cycle Federation and FIM Motorcycle Sport Federation were fighting over this thing called e-bike. I didn't even know what e-bike was at that time. Over COVID, it had gained huge momentum. And we started to build these things and shape what we wanted. But then, of course, as a business, COVID finished and we became really busy with Common Games. Actually, that 22 was one of the most bonkers years I've ever had because COVID stopped everything and everything all happened in 12 months. Really, really mad. So the whole e-bike thing was put a little bit on standby and hold at that point. Are we, when we look at trends, the world went mad for the concept of electric. Quite simply, in my view, we can't survive on everything being an electric vehicle. We don't have the duration, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the charging points. It just cannot work. But actually, from a city perspective, e-mobility is really quite sensible. And getting people more mobile. And we're seeing already the change on high streets from perhaps big shopping centres and resources to becoming more community-led, more residential, more restaurants, more lifestyle. And I think, again, I'll refer to AI, with technology like AI coming on where businesses can be more efficient, it means people are going to have more time. Doesn't mean everybody's losing their job, but it means people have got more time to do. And I think in that state, sport, recreation, participation is going to be really, really important alongside keeping active, which is where that active mobility comes on. So I think we're right at the right time. We know cities are signing up to big programs. We know cities are looking at cycle lanes. We know that cities are pedestrianising areas. We know cities are looking at smart city solutions, and therefore going to try and embrace that and become that catalyst to help them change.
That's fantastic. Andy, I mean, this is, again, an incredible vision. It sounds like the time is perfectly right, but you're also in a different position with this startup than you were for ones in the past. not just in terms of your knowledge and your experience, but also the technology that's available today, right? You mentioned it just a moment ago, AI. It's affecting business and life in some pretty grand ways now. Where is AI starting to show up in RAL 6010 or the plans that you have for what you're working on now?
I think what's really interesting with AI, I mean, I'm mad ChatGPT and Gemini and I engage all the time. What I recognise, and I recognised this probably 6 months ago, I would say 2/3 of the correspondence I receive is AI generated in some route or other. And when I'm actually engaged with really interesting people, not that I'm saying I'm interesting, but people like myself, people who have been head of federations and things like that, our correspondence is AI. Of course, it's got the tone and it's got our knowledge in it, but actually, I can tell we're talking AI to AI, and therefore that process, it just makes life a little bit easier. But where I really like it is when I'm looking at tasks and looking at it. And only today, I saw some comment on LinkedIn saying it was an agency saying 2 clients this week had asked about alternative potential sponsorship routes as opposed to the normal. And it said, and here is an example, and it had used Claude, and it had said to Claude, go and research whatever, and it came up with a list of 10 really appropriate, non-mainstream potential partners for this particular property. And I thought, this is exactly what I'm advocating. I spend quite a lot of time looking outside and thinking outside the box.
Andy, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, and your long-term vision. Thank you for joining us on the Growth Shift today.
Another powerful conversation on the Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on the Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.